Thank you so much for joining the littleBits webinar today on Monday, December 3rd. We are going to get started in about another minute or two. We just want to allow everyone who registered for today's webinar to get the opportunity to join. So again, thank you all for coming today, and we'll get started really shortly.
And in the meantime, we'd love to not only hear who you are and a little bit about you, but have you introduce yourselves to your colleagues on this webinar. So you can use the questions piece in your toolbar, not only to ask us questions throughout the webinar as they come up, and Max and I are available to answer them throughout the webinar, but also at the end. But also you can use that chat box to introduce yourself, where you're from, sort of meet your colleagues that are on the call with us.
Totally. And if you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, please submit them through that questions panel. We see we have a couple people on the webinar right now. Can you type in to confirm that you hear us and see us right now and can see our screen? That would be really helpful for anyone who is currently on the webinar right now. If you can just quickly type in that you can hear and see us, that would be much appreciated.
Yep. And it's just 4, so we'll wait another minute or so for any latecomers, and then we'll get started. It'll be about half an hour today. Okay, thank you, Joanne. We're glad you can see and hear us.
Appreciate it. Again, we'll start in another 60 seconds or so. This way, everyone who planned to join is able to.
Just check out this and make sure we're displaying correctly.
Fine. Joanne, on your screen, and for anyone else that's listening, you can see it says littleBits Education Fall 2018 right now on your screen.
And hopefully you see at least part of my face and Max's face on the webcam.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool. All right, do you want to get started?
Sure. So
awesome.
Welcome, everyone. We're really excited for you to be here. It is December. I can't believe it's December already, and it's a perfect time to talk about New Year's resolutions for your classroom in 2019 and planning for them now so that you step into the classroom January 2nd, refreshed after your break and your New Year's celebration, and ready to really reinvigorate your classroom and your students with some of the resolutions we're going to talk about today. So as you join, again, just want to reiterate, please put any questions that you have throughout the presentation into the presentation box in your toolbar. Max and I are available to answer during the presentation, and we'll stay on after as well. And we'd love to have you introduce yourselves. There are a few of you on this call that are live at the moment. If you could just say, where you're from, maybe what you do, what you're interested in, etc., so that we can all get to know each other as a group. And so today we're going to talk about, today's webinar is about New Year's resolutions in a snap, ways to reinvigorate your classroom in the new year. A little bit about myself before we get started. I'm Naveen Murad. I'm the Senior Manager of Community Programs. I actually work on the education team here. And my background is in education. I started as a middle school English teacher in New York City public schools for the beginning of my career. So for me, coming to littleBits has been really great because I get to give the perspective of the classroom teacher and what they need and want in the classroom to a company like littleBits that really wants to help educators and students.
Amazing. And I'm Max Ringolheim. I'm the channel account manager over here at littleBits. I get the opportunity to work with all different types of, whether it's independent schools, public schools, you name it, all different types of educators who are looking to offer the latest and greatest and really the most valuable STEAM programs here on the market here at littleBits in their schools. And that's a little bit about me over here.
Great. So let's get started and jump in. So just so you know what to expect, we're going to go over 3 resolutions that you can take into your classroom in January and start planning for now. We're going to look at project-based learning, launching a makerspace, and computer science education, and ways that littleBits can help you achieve each of these goals in the new year. We'll end with a question and answer session. So again, keep putting those questions in as they pop up. So for those of you who might be less familiar with littleBits, just a little introduction to the company mission and the product. So we are a technology company that's really reinventing learning to raise a generation of change makers. And it's a system, littleBits themselves are a system of electronic building blocks that snap together, that help students really turn ideas into inventions and makes building with technology accessible. This slide shows the bits and how it works. So it's a library of modular bits that are color-coded, as you see, magnetic and snap together, that can be combined in literally thousands of ways. Blue is power. Any pink bit would be an input. An orange bit is a wire that will help you extend your circuit. And a green bit, such as the bar graph you see lighting up, or the buzzer, is an output, so it's going to do something. So it's a really simple and intuitive system. It's easy to take apart and put back together, to experiment, to iterate, to change, to sort of fail forward with, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And because it's color-coded system and it's magnetic, students pick up on it really quick. Once they learn what each color stands for, they can then apply that learning to the entire library of over 70 bits to invent whatever they can imagine.
Yeah, we literally, believe that students can create millions of different types of inventions using these color-coded electronic building blocks, and you're looking at about 4 of what are, over 70 different bits in the library here at littleBits.
Yeah. So that's the basics of how they work. But let's dig into resolution 1, project-based learning. So I love project-based learning. As an educator myself, I find it's the way that you really engage students in meaningful learning in the classroom. So to first talk about project-based learning, let's talk about what it is. It's really when you have students start with a question or challenge or problem and engage with it over an extended period of time, take ownership of their own learning to address this authentic challenge or question or problem, and invent something to address it. So it's very real world applicable. Students take ownership of their learning because they decide what they want to address, how they're going to address it, what they need to learn to address it, both knowledge and skills. And you're there to guide them along the process, but they are really there making and creating basically the syllabus for their project and what they're going to learn. A really great resource that I'm going to talk about is the Buck Institute for Education. They have amazing resources for teachers. They have video resources, articles, rubrics, student handouts, so student-facing, teacher-facing. They're just really a wealth of resources on project-based learning, and this is where I go whenever I want to dive deeper into what project-based learning is, or look for specific tools that I might want to use or adapt.
Yeah, I think you said earlier you've done the vetting for everyone on the webinar, right?
Yes,
so you know that this is good stuff.
I know the BIE is good stuff. The Buck Institute is really good stuff. And so project-based learning, like one of the essential things to think about when you're bringing project-based learning into your classroom is starting with that good driving question. And it should be something that's complex and that's real world and that students are going to feel the need to address. So whenever you can really have a provocative question or a question that speaks to students' interests and passions, that's really going to be the hook that gets students invested in this longer term project. They can come from curriculum you have to cover. They can also come from, depending on the setting you're in, students' interests. And the more you can tie them to real world issues, the more relevant they become, and students see them as really inventing for purpose rather than inventing for a class assignment. There's a really great resource that I put the link to in the bottom of this slide in the Buck Institute website. It's a 2-brick exercise. It's basically a game that you can play with a colleague to help draft some really good driving questions for your project-based learning. So that's a really good resource to use.
Also, so you know, for anyone that gets curious, we'll happily send out the link to this presentation afterwards, so you can go to these links yourself in case you don't have a way to write it down right now.
Yep, and I also just wanted to show you, so this is, I just took you to the Buck Institute for Education's website, and so there's a lot of background, so if you want to read up on why and what about PBL, but where I am showing you resources from is this resources tab. If you click here, you can see they just have a wealth of resources. They're divided by media type, you can keyword, audience, experience level, age level, they have online tools, they have student handouts. I mean, they really have a wonderful, wonderful library. So couldn't recommend more the Buck Institute for learning and more about project-based learning and using those tools that are ready to go. And just give me one second while I navigate back. Okay, great. And so, we just talked about the Buck Institute. There are other, here are two other sites that I really recommend highly in terms of learning about project-based learning. I've highlighted a couple of resources under each, but these are both really strong sites and organizations and really reliable sources. So Edutopia has a video series on 5 keys to project-based learning. And an introduction to project-based learning video. I personally love watching the videos because I love hearing from educators and seeing students and seeing class in action. And then the teaching channel along that line does a lot of video with examples of teachers, who are really exemplifying this practice.
And so for them, it's not like they have to reinvent the wheel. They can actually watch these videos and get a real sense of how all this works, especially if they're new to these topics.
Yeah, and it's seeing best practices by educators that have really excelled or really refined their skills in this kind of teaching. So again, just to reiterate, project-based learning is great because students are authentically figuring out how to solve a problem on their own, what they need to know, and then you guide them, when they figure out what they need to know, then where are they going to know that from? So you're there to guide them, but they're really taking ownership of their own learning, and it really comes through in their projects. And the great thing about project-based learning in littleBits is it really goes together like PB and J, PB project-based, PB and L we can say, project-based learning.
We have our cute jokes here at littleBits. Sorry.
Well, former teacher have to do the cheesy jokes. So every littleBits experience is created around the littleBits Invention Cycle experience, and this is project-based learning. So you start with a driving question or challenge, and then students are going to move right away into creating, into problem solving, into thinking critically about how to address that. They're going to research, collaborate, make something, do something, and then the play phase, they're testing it out. We're not looking at a perfect solution here now. They're seeing how they did. They're reflecting on what they could make better or different or add or subtract to better reach their goal. In the remix phase, they have the opportunity to iterate. So to take those reflections that they observed during the play phase and remix them, make it better or make it completely different even. And then finally, the invention cycle ends with sharing. And sharing is a really important piece of project-based learning and the invention cycle because students share with an authentic audience that really gives them a reason to do their best and a reason to really impress their peers, impress community members, impress parents. I always liked to, whenever possible, invite in audience members at the end of a project-based learning unit from outside of the classroom to see student projects because students really just rise to the occasion when they know that they're presenting to people outside of their immediate class.
Cool.
And Max is going to take over right here.
Cool. So for everyone, when it comes to project-based learning and this idea of allowing students to take control over their projects and solve challenges, for project-based learning related exercise in the classroom, our STEAM student set is a phenomenal program to offer to accomplish this. One of the reasons is because of the fact that it comes with, inside of the box, a 72-page long Invention Guide booklet that has all the corresponding curriculum, lesson plans, design challenges, inventions inside of it. On top of that, it also comes with a 122-page long teacher curriculum guide that corresponds to all the various different NGSS science standards. And so the two of those, both of those documents really allow this particular littleBits program to flourish in the classroom, especially from a project-based learning standpoint, especially given the modularity of our bits and our program as a whole, where students can really just pick a challenge and go ahead and try and solve for that challenge using littleBits. Here are some examples of the different inventions that students can create with the STEAM student set. Again, you get step-by-step guidance in terms of building each of these inventions. And one of the beautiful things about the STEAM student set and littleBits as a whole is students will actually build some of these inventions, but then their mind starts racing and they start thinking, well, what else can I build? And that's when project-based learning becomes really exciting with littleBits and our STEAM student set, because they'll start thinking about a particular challenge, like maybe inventing something for good in their local community. They'll take on that design challenge and solve for it using littleBits. And again, that is where you really start to see some really powerful volume speak and can go in tandem with your 2019 New Year's resolution here.
Yep. And through each invention, they're going through the invention cycle. So it's a really nice scaffold to sort of more free-form project-based learning. Before you let them sort of go out on their own, the inventions in the STEAM student set are teaching the mindset of the invention cycle, which they'll use in project-based learning.
Totally. And here is a great example of project-based learning in action. This is Sam. He's a 5th grader, and he's one of our success stories that we love to highlight for a couple of reasons. The green arrow pointing at that invention that he created, that is an automated cat feeder invention. It's actually called Social Cat. And Sam saw a challenge or a problem in the marketplace where cats he felt were over-euthanized, overeating, and he wanted to create an invention to solve for that challenge. And hence, what he decided to do was create, using an MP3 player bit, a power bit, and some additional bits, he decided to create this automated pet feeder that when the cat would approach his feeding dish, all of a sudden, the soothing voice of the owner would output on the speaker bit, and the cat would have food get automatically dispensed into his feeder with his cat food. And when Sam created this Social Cat invention using littleBits, not only did he showcase some incredible imagination actually creating this and putting it to work, but he actually applied for a patent and received a patent from the U.S. government for this invention. And so, again, it speaks to how powerful littleBits and our platform of building blocks can be for such young students.
Absolutely. Okay, so resolution number 2. Perhaps you've been thinking about launching that makerspace, and now is the time to get started. It shouldn't be something to be afraid of. Making is imagination, having your students use their imaginations to create something that they love or that they feel is meaningful to impact the world. It's really as simple as that. There is no right or wrong in making. Totally. One of our educators who's a librarian and has a makerspace where she uses littleBits talks about creating. So when we talk about making, we talk about creating and making, not only making things, but making mistakes. As being essential to how students learn and grow.
Failing forward, right?
Failing forward. So there's so much value to having a makerspace, whether it be a full room that's designated as a makerspace or even a rolling cart, and we'll talk about that later. But having a makerspace, allowing students to tinker, to actually go after what they imagine, put their ideas into action, that is really empowering for students. So when you're thinking about starting your makerspace, it can be overwhelming. It's helpful to think about what your initial focus will be or what your initial goals are. So that it doesn't have to be just one, but starting with 1 or 2 or perhaps 3 will help you think about not only programming, but materials and content you'll need for your makerspace. And then I know at the top of mind of every educator that wants to start a makerspace is, where am I going to get the materials? So I think number 1 is once you've honed down on your goals or the focus of your makerspace, that helps you focus in on the types of materials you'll need. And makerspaces don't have to be all high tech. You can have really low tech arts and crafts, pipe cleaners, tape, scissors, cardboard are all parts of a wonderful makerspace. And so thinking about how you get materials, it doesn't have to come from a huge budget. I mean, you can do a combination of bringing what you have, buying what's essential or what might be a really just attractive feature for your students, and borrowing other things. So bringing materials you might have at home, things you might have invented at home or your family might have. Buying things you need, and it doesn't have to be expensive things. It can be popsicle sticks. You can
things that your local janitor in your school maybe decide to bring, to you because you requested, right?
Etc. You might want to splurge on one exciting product, like maybe you want some littleBits to sort of be the attraction factor for your students, but not everything has to be like 3D printers and like virtual reality. And then borrowing is also really great. So there are services that are less expensive sometimes than buying the 3D printer. And there's also asking for donations. So Max mentioned stuff your janitor at the school might have, going to the lunchroom and getting cardboard, talking to your PTA, asking students to bring materials from home. These are all ways to bring things into your makerspace.
Instead of throwing away the paper towel holders, maybe it's you ask the janitor to, provide them to you before them going in the garbage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the really big takeaway here is you don't have to have everything to start your makerspace. You really just need a few things and an idea of what you want your students to get out of it to get started. And you can grow and grow and grow from there.
So here at littleBits, there are two particular programs that we have that offer and cater really well to the makerspace environment. Ultimately, you can start small, you can go a little bit deeper, and these are the two programs that we offer for that. Our workshop set is phenomenal for offering, a collection of around 30 some odd students at once to be simultaneously inventing, and you'll get over 160 bits. It comes in one of these tackle boxes that you're seeing on the screen, and it's a great first entry point into offering littleBits in your makerspace. Our pro library on the right-hand side is a little bit of a deeper investment, where ultimately now all of a sudden we're talking about maybe 50 some odd students who are inventing simultaneously using our pro library. One of the beautiful things about the Pro Library is the fact that you get access to all of the different bits in the littleBits library. So earlier we talked about how there are over 70 different bits here at littleBits. You will get access to every one of those bits and a multitude of each one. The thing that I really want to stress here with regards to making in a makerspace environment, it is all about empowering your students to basically be able to create something that they're passionate about. And similar to what Naveen just mentioned before, outlining what you want your goals of your makerspace to be, and then identifying which products you want to make up your makerspace that you can accomplish those said goals is a great place to start, so that your students can really feel both empowered and passionate about what they're doing. And these are two phenomenal programs that we offer that can cater to those goals.
Wonderful. Thanks, Max. And then you want to talk a little bit about the flexibility?
Yeah, without a doubt. When it comes to a makerspace, when it comes to your school, ultimately it's the flexibility of being able to offer. Maybe it's that pro library or that workshop set in various different environments. So maybe your makerspace, is only one, small classroom, or maybe your makerspace is, 5 large classrooms combined in one. Whatever the environment might be, littleBits can cater very nicely to that. A lot of schools we find tend to have these mobile makerspaces where they have like one of these push carts, and they put some littleBits on those push carts in order for the makerspace to actually be mobile. We find that to be super exciting, and it works. There's no doubt about it. Given the well over 20,000 teachers who are using littleBits in their schools these days, it ends up being used in all these different shapes and sizes. What we want to make sure we hit home for you guys.
Absolutely. And so now moving on to resolution number 3, computer science education. So we're going to look at this within the lens of STEAM first, because STEAM is definitely something that I think is very much now has been in the discourse about what's really important to be teaching our students in school. But not all of STEAM is really created equal. And when we look into STEAM, it's really computing and computer science where a lot of the opportunity is in terms of where students will be in the future and making them future ready. So the majority of new jobs are in computing, and the rate at which they are supposed to multiply is at twice the rate of any other field or profession. So we really want to prepare our students to be ready for that future where computing is going to open hundreds of doors. That being said, even though that's the reality of the workforce, 90% of parents want their students to study computer science, and for good reason, but less than half of our schools are teaching computer programming. And so there's obviously a big gap here. How are we going to have this? How are we going to fulfill all of these roles and needs when we're not teaching computer programming to our students? And it's not just about raising a generation of computer programmers. Computer science is about so much more than that. It teaches a way of thinking that is going to be fundamental for the careers that don't even exist yet. These are skills like problem solving, creativity, communication, collaboration, that cross basically every discipline and field. And these are all things that are taught when students are learning computer science.
Yeah, and one thing also to add for everyone listening is, these days, a lot of educators, look at computer science and coding as really like the next bilingual language for their students to learn. Maybe, years ago it might have been a different language like a Spanish or French that you might, really be putting emphasis on to learn. And these days, given all these jobs that are on the horizon in machine learning, artificial intelligence, you name it, it's this concept of being able to know and understand and essentially speak, code and understand what that is about. That will prep your students for these 21st century careers in those more advanced fields, that are on the horizon.
Yeah. And so one thing I wanted to share with you, because I think it's really helpful, my background when I was a teacher, I taught English and social studies. So I did not have an engineering or science or math background at all. And at the time, had you approached me about incorporating STEAM into my curriculum, which I think we all agree as educators that STEAM and computational thinking really need to be addressed in every class, not just your math, science, or technology class. Introducing students to coding in a way that they can identify with. So really taking it and connecting it to the real world experiences that they can understand is a great way. I'm going to show you a short clip. You can find this on YouTube. You can find this on our website as well. It's called, as for the code kit, My First Lesson. And watch how this teacher basically explains to students that coding is nothing more than giving a set of precise instructions to a computer.
The goal of this exercise is to start thinking about how things can be broken into a sequence of actions, just like how a computer follows a precise set of instructions. So I want you to treat me like a robot. I am now Rob 2.1 gigawatt robot machine. I now specialize in throwing out garbage into trash cans. So for this activity, you're going to program me, your teacher, as if I was a robot. So take a minute and write down the steps that you would program me, how you would tell me as a robot to do that activity.
So if you go on to watch this, it's actually quite funny because the students do give him directions, but they're not precise enough, and so he ends up doing some funny movements. But it really illustrates in a way that students can address why coding needs to be precise, what coding is, and brings it down to something really simple to understand. It's a set of instructions that needs to be precise.
That's right.
Oops. Next slide. Okay.
Cool. So just to cover a few things on the computer science front, here at littleBits, we have a phenomenal program. It's called our Code Kit. Our Code Kit comes with all of the corresponding curriculum, lesson plans, design challenges, PowerPoint slides, you name it, that you could possibly need to teach the Code Kit inside the classroom. The one thing that I love to share with educators is that you don't need to have any background in computer science or coding or have graduated from a university with a degree in computer science in order to teach the Code Kit. That is how we created the product. We wanted to build it so that any ordinary teacher could take advantage of this program in the classroom. And that, is, again, it's one of our newer programs that we launched about 16 months ago.
Yeah, and one of the things I really love in here is that the code tutorials, which are teaching the basic concepts, are again relating it to things students know in the real world. So the code tutorials will relate different coding concepts to the 5 senses, for example, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting.
Cool. And here's a quick look at what some of the inventions look like from the code kit. So you'll notice the games or these inventions have a very game-focused sort of appeal. These are all games that we might have been familiar with as a child, like Hot Potato of Doom or Tug of War, but that with the littleBits code kit, you create a much more innovative spin on these games. And the students are actually able to build these inventions and then go onto the computer and actually write lines of code that communicate with the invention what they should do. So what's really powerful about the code kit is the fact that you can take the hardware circuitry world and connect it to the computer science coding world. And the code kit acts as a phenomenal bridge, connecting both of those two worlds for both the educator and the student. You'll notice the terms on the bottom here, functions, variables, logic, and loops. These are the computer science principles that are covered using the code kit. And these are the same computer science principles that, engineers at Google, Stanford, etc., you name it, at all the popular universities or all the major tech companies, they use these terms in their daily work habits when they're building the next latest and greatest invention for those other companies. And so again, the code kit just does a phenomenal job of just stripping down coding into what it is. It's just a set of different instructions that essentially allow a child to create this remarkable code base that does something. And the littleBits code kit does a very good job of doing that in a super easy and accessible way.
Yeah. I want to just mention the coding canvas and the coding language that's used as block coding, which is really similar to Scratch. It's really accessible to students. So this the app and the code kit is a really great introduction to beginner coders and takes students from basics to inventions to an open challenge.
Without a doubt. And so just to wrap up here, because we are at the end of our presentation, and we'll take any questions that you have afterwards, please feel free to start submitting them now if you have any. It's just, again, to wrap up, why littleBits, as part of your January 2019 implementation or your 2019 New Year's resolutions. Number one would be gender neutrality. So you might notice that our bits, they're super color-coded, they're candy-colored, and that's on purpose. That's because our platform of these electronic building blocks, they attract, believe it or not, nearly a 40% user base of females. So we are doing a phenomenal job of getting more females integrated into the technology world using our gender-neutral platform of electronic building blocks. Number two, the low lift to implement. I mentioned with the STEAM student set, you get that invention guide booklet. With the code kit, you get all the lesson plans. These are all free of charge resources, and as a result, it makes your job as an educator super low lift to implement our programs in the classroom without having any background in these topics. Number three, 21st century skills for these 21st century careers. We highlighted it before: machine learning, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, you name it. These are all these 21st century careers that are on the horizon, and littleBits does a phenomenal job of equipping students with the skills needed to take on those jobs. Again, we're looking to not teach, but rather empower and get kids excited around technology. And lastly, the idea in a school setting, littleBits can be both cross-curricular across your art, math, science classes, as well as cross-departmental in your after-school program, makerspace, library, classroom. We offer this really easy to implement way of being both cross-curricular and cross-departmental, whichever way you see fit that's best for your school. So with that, that is everything for our presentation today. If you have any questions about our programs, please email me, max@littlebits.com. We would love to answer any questions that you have. Right now is a phenomenal time, not only because of New Year's resolutions purposes, but we have some incredible offers taking place in terms of purchasing some of your first littleBits. We have something called a grant program that you can take advantage of. If you're a museum, we have some really interesting museum offerings that we can extend your way. So just know that this is a great time to buy from a special offer standpoint. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them now, and we would love to answer them for you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And we all know that if you really want to reinvigorate for 2019, you need to start planning now. And so that's why we're hoping that some of these ideas might show you how littleBits can help you meet the resolutions you have for your classroom, and really re-energize when you and your students walk back in January.
Amazing. So we'll stick around for another minute or two. If any questions have popped up, please feel free to send them in. And if not, we'll log off the webinar in about another minute or two. But does anyone have any questions that they want to submit? We are here to answer them, I promise. None that have been submitted yet. Don't be shy.
You can also, if perhaps you don't have a question at the moment, but you think of something a little bit later after we sign off, again, email Max. Max is happy to give you more examples of how it's been used in the classroom, power user inventions, or talk to you more about the resources that come with the various kits.
That's right. Without a doubt. It's definitely something that my team and I do all the time. So feel free to email me, max@littlebits.com, and happy to answer any questions post-webinar.
Yep. And thank you all for taking the time. We know that teachers and educators are super busy, so taking half an hour out of your time to listen, we truly appreciate it, and we wish you the best for the upcoming school year.
Thank you, guys. It doesn't look like any other questions have been submitted. Again, feel free to email me directly if any pop up afterwards, but truly appreciate the time. Thank you so much.